Guys, just a sec.
Sorry.
All right, so we're doing stair layout here. Now, it's very simple. You don't have to make it too complicated. If we have a rough idea of what our height is from decking to grade, we can divide that up by 7 and see how many rises we're going to have. Then we just take that rise number, if it's 4 rises or 3 rises, we divide our number by that. That gives us our actual rise. It's important that you add the finish. When you're going to grade like this, you need to add the finish of your decking height to this number before you calculate it, because then we're going to take the thickness of decking off the bottom stringer. It's going to lower the whole system down, and then when you apply your decking boards to the frame and the stairs, everything will have a consistent rise. So if I know that I'm going to be 4 rises, 3 steps, we have about 29 inches here, 28 and a half. So I know that I'm going to have 3 treads. I'm going to be 30 inches out. So I want to take my height to grade 30 inches away from the deck, because if there's pitch here on the ground, we need to take it exactly where we're going to land so we have the proper rise at the bottom of the stairs. Now I'm going to add the thickness of my decking to this. So I'm 28 and a quarter. It's actually going to be 29 and a quarter. But I do want to take note here that the spot I'm measuring to, this grade in front, is a little bit higher. So, you know, I could probably call it 29, give myself a little bit of room to work, because there is an irregular grade here. So all I'm going to do now is take my calculator, and obviously you could do this in your head, it's 7 and a quarter. But if I had 29 inches and I divide that up by 4, I get 7 and a quarter. The other thing I can do with this calculator, if I was to say it's a 29-inch rise and then press the stair button, it's going to calculate that for me. It's also going to tell me how many rises it is, what the over-under is. I have my tread width, so it's going to be 3 treads, 4 rises, and it'll also give me my stringer length. 37 1/16 is the size and material I need to cut that stringer out of. So this is a nice tool for when you're trying to calculate how many 2x12s you need and how long you need them to be to cut each one, minus the waist of the triangles are going to get cut off either end. All right, so this is what I'm using for layout. Now, I want to note that there's a couple of different ways to do this. Some guys will like to make a tick mark at the hypotenuse, which you can easily take that rise and run and calculate the hypotenuse off of it, even without a calculator. And the way that would be done is just taking a dimension from the rise to the run. So if I was to take 7 and a quarter and measure to 10, my hypotenuse is going to be 12 and 5/16. Okay, so if I was to make a tick mark 12 and 5/16 down the board, at every 12 and 5/16 is where my rise and my run are going to intersect. So if I come on here and I'm using these framing jigs, all right, and I like to put them on the inside of the square, but all I'm going to do is just start by setting my rise 7 and a quarter and my run 10 on the edge of the board. Then I'll take these jigs, I'll slip them on here, slide them to the board, and I'll clamp them down. So that sets my rise and run and my hypotenuse. The easiest thing to do is to take a rough of our bottom rise. Now remember, we're going to be taking an inch off this bottom rise, so I only need 6 and a quarter, not 7 and a quarter. But I could hold at the 10 and I could guesstimate how much I can squeeze out of this stringer. It would be right about there, where I can still get 6 and a quarter and square it back for that bottom rise. So this would really be my first triangle that I'm going to draw at the base of the stringer. So I have my first run and my second rise. The next task is, if I'm not mapping out this hypotenuse, is just going to be to slide this up and sight my run mark, which is 10. And as soon as that 10 aligns with my rise, I know that I'm on hypotenuse, and I can trace that next one out. So same thing, we're going to slide up again. I'm just going to align that 10 with my rise. Come over here. Come over here. All right, so I'm sliding right up until that 10. You can see like a really nice alignment with that. And that's my next one. So we have 3 treads. So this is going to be the end of the line here. So we're going to do a solid backer on this stringer. In other words, we're going to assemble it to a piece of 2x stock behind the stringers, and then we're going to attach that to that structure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 1.5 inches off this final run. I can come back here to kind of square up, or I can flip my saw to the other side of the lumber and align that, get that back. Okay. So we have 10, 10, 8.5. And once this gets this backer right here, we'll have 8.5, we'll have 10 on the back as well. Now they are going to get a fascia on the front, but that same fascia is going to get applied to, so we're going to have a 1/2 inch fascia that gets applied to the rim joist on the deck, and then we'll have a 1/2 inch fascia that gets applied to each tread. Therefore, we will remain the same 10-inch run throughout. So if you add something to one tread, you have to add them to all of them, or you have to eliminate that distance to make it the same. Couple of things with cutting. Now you'll see I like to do it with a loose deck. I like to kind of plunge and be able to lift. It's not necessary. You can just line up the saw. I like to cut all of my rises first, and then I cut my runs. And I do that from, you know, cutting a lot of wood stringers. They can like to pinch from the crown and the grain, kind of pushing on that cut. Once it gets cut open, it might want to curl in. So I always found that making the shorter cut first to give it a little bit of relief, making those longer run cuts afterwards will be a little easier. I don't like to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I like to cut all in the same direction, turn around, cut back, all in the same direction. And then obviously my last cut will be to free it from the board. You can do this on a couple of blocks as well, on a flat surface instead of hanging off. That's probably, once I get a couple of rip cuts, I'll start transferring this pattern down, and I'll cut it on top of the other joist. Now you'll notice I'm not over cutting. I'm cutting to the line of my run, and then I'm going to clean them out with a jigsaw. So I don't want those overcuts. We only have a certain amount of throat here, and we don't want to create a cut that's going to make it prone to weakness at that throat. Another quick saw tip. So you see that this deck has guide marks in it. We have 0, and then when it's beveled to 45, they have a different guide mark. Now, when I start going to align my saw, I'm always starting with the 0 tick on the line that I'm going to cut. Because that means that when I align the blade with my cut mark and the 0 tip, the saw is straight. What you'll see a lot of people do is they're just looking at the blade. So if my deck is crooked and my blade is aligned and I start to cut, then you're going to hear the saw bog down while I try to turn a straight blade round and angle it. So that's, you know, if I start with the saw straight by aligning that 0 tick mark and by putting my blade over the line, it's going to be more prone to just want to cut straight and pretty much just have to guide it down the line. So we're always marking our pattern. I'm actually going to do it on this one on the heel, but I always want to mark my pattern so we don't get them confused if we were to cut one by one. So we're always tracing off of the same one. Taking my little barrel grip jigsaw and just finishing these out. Okay. There's our pattern complete. Now, we're just going to align that on this back edge. Now, the dimension of the stringer doesn't have to be perfect. If you have 3 different pieces of 2x12, and one is 11 1/4, one is 11 3/8, and one is 11 1/2, when you trace this pattern out, the back side of this, unless you're putting a finished ceiling underneath the stairs, isn't really going to matter, because you could add a 1/2 inch to this dimension, and when you mount this plumb cut and you lay this seat cut, it's going to sit in the same, and these are still going to line up. So we're just going to trace this out with a nice sharp pencil. Okay, then I'm going to go right down the line. I'm going to do 5 of them. Okay, so we have our 5 laid out, and now what I'm going to do, so I don't have to keep sliding it down, is I'm going to put some blocks underneath it, because the skill saw cuts 2 3/4. So by having some blocks under here, I can leave it full depth and make all my cuts without having to lift it up or move it. So we're going to go over a skirt detail, so trim that covers the stair stringer. Although with this Owens Corning you don't really need to trim it out, but we're going to go over what that would look like. Now this is going to have a solid riser on the front of it, so we can just picture we're going to have a block on the front. We're also going to have one on the back, but just for layout here, what I'm doing is I'm tracing the short point of the miter that's going to go to the riser board, and then I'm tracing the tread, which will be a 0 degree cut, square cut. So that'll be a miter, and this will be square. We'll just trace that right out. This is easiest to do before you mount it on the building, because you can trace the bottom and both sides, and really the whole thing the way it's going to sit, so you don't have to end up taking dimensions. So same thing, we're going to block the back of this, because there's going to be a solid block on the back, and we're going to go ahead and trace that out. So we're left with our layout, which is pretty much just a stringer pattern with the blocks added back in. And then what we'll do is, I'm going to do this on the miter saw, because this miter saw actually goes to 60 degrees both ways. You can see that that's one of the things that you get with these Makita saws, is they have this ability to go to 60 degrees both ways. Your typical stair is going to be about 53, 55. This one's probably in that range, so 7 1/4, 10. Even with the ones that won't bevel, miter, past 60, you can still use the saw to make all your 45 degree bevel cuts on the rises, and then just trim out. So I like to do it from the back, so I don't have to go back and do additional jigsawing, especially on that bevel cut. But pretty much I'm just going to set my saw at this 36 heavy. We're going to bevel the saw to 45. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the riser, and I'm going to overcut it a little bit. That way when I make my square cuts and I flip it over, it'll be cut through. So I kind of made a first pass just to check my miter, my angle, and I can see I'm a little bit tight on the inside. I'm just going to give it like a little bump. I don't want that to be shy on that inside. see how I kind of overcut that a little bit. I'm gonna need a little more overcut on that. Probably about a 1/2 inch will bring me flush to the bottom of that other cut. And that should do it. You might be able to see it if you come back over here. Come on. You kind of look down at that line, like where the bottom of my cut is. So when I cut that line, there's no like notch there. Okay, so you can see I just kind of back cut it right up until I met that. So I leave, there's a little piece there, but that'll leave me with a nice clean corner in there without having to jig it out. I would say this is an advanced method here. You can definitely square cut your skirt. You can square cut your risers and just hang the riser over the edge about a 1/2 inch or a 1/4 inch to give it a little reveal. So we need a left side. So this is going to be the left side. We're going to want it to go like that. Flip that over, we'll put our little block on it, trace it out, crush this second one out. So I was just tracing that layout. All right, we've added the 1.5 inches to the back, 1.5 inches to the front. I'm going to trace that bottom, take it over to the saw, and repeat. So Chaz has our pieces here to assemble. We will, so that's our bottom and top. We had one piece that we could use to do the top in white. So I like to have that cut edge facing up. So we'll put the cut edges to each other. We're 48, so we're going to do a 12-inch on center layout. Back. So it's actually going to be reduced by 1.5 inches, so we'll have an outside. I need to go to you a bit.
So what are you marking for now?
So this is my distance off the deck. So we're 30 inches total. So I did it at 25, so we're halfway through the bottom step, and that's where our post will go. And then this will put them pretty much center right in the bay of the actual step itself.
Just, you know, that's why I said sometimes you want to kind of hold it against it because it It just wants to go back.
Yeah.
You know, and you hold that pressure long enough, and you can drive it down a little bit, and it'll get it to stay there better. You know what I mean? So really, it's just the only important part about this is that the stairs don't do this seasonally when the ground freezes, so it doesn't detach them from the rim joist. All right, so what Chaz is doing now, he's cutting 3 strong backs, pieces of 2x4 that we're going to hang inside that frame. We're going to fasten them with screws to the back of this rim joist. Then we are going to pad a 2x4 underneath this to give us more surface area to bolt this back brace for these stairs. Because it's a 7¼ inch rise, we're only left with about 2 inches here repairing. So we're going to add 3½. That'll be 5½, plenty of room. This is going to go in here and mount like that. So I'm going to grab us some screws to bolt these things in. You like it?
Yep.
I'm guessing that. To the lowest. Alright, so what we got right here, Chaz is a little, he's a little low and I'm a little high. Alright, I just got a little bit of dirt on here, it's pushing me from the pile, so I'm going to let mine down. Because really, just like the deck, I just want a tiny bit of fall. Now everything's Louis V, you know what I mean? Oh, man.
Probably heavier.
Bottom one, 49. They drop a 16th. This one doesn't look, what is it, cupped? So, sometimes you're going to find that when you're trying to cut flat stock like this, and you're cutting a bevel, if there's any cup to the material, so if it has any curvature to it, you'll see when it leaves more material on the ends, because they are sitting higher away from the blade. So it's, you know, the best way to work with it is to try to get it to sit as flat. You can use the clamp that comes with the saw and pin the front, or put a clamp on it. But when you're making these, especially with like a mitered skirt or something, you really got to try to get it to sit as flat as you can, because any of that bell that's up, you know, any of that crown and the board is going to create, you can see it right there. If you look down this, how this end is like a little strong. And it's not really because of the saw, it's because of the crown of the board. Sometimes it's just something that just wants to happen. We can make that work. Yeah. This stuff we were applying with finish nails because it's not deep enough to put a plug in it. We want this finished, but it does not move, it does not expand and contract, so it will stay like this long term. We're not worried about it moving those fasteners around. These 15 gauge angled finish nails will make a very strong finish. You need a hammer and a bar to get them off. Just add 2 inches to that length and cut square shreds.
Straight square out of the solid.
Yes, please. The right way to do it would have been closer.
So we'll do 1.5 and 4. What do you think about that, camera guy? No poke, nothing. Nice and flush. I'm gonna get my deck spacing.
Have you done this before, or is this your first time?
This is my first time.
Oh.
First week here. I was actually a lunch man at a local middle school.
We're just hammering.